Masechet Sotah Daf Tet. We saw yesterday a long baraita on the theme of midah keneged midah, and now we're going to go and analyze a few sections of that baraita. Baraita taught, u'me'achar denafka le me'achat le'achat limso cheshbon, ki chol se'on so'en berash lamali. The baraita asked for sources, pisukim, in which we see the principle of midah keneged midah, and it brought three of them. One of them that it brought is one by one, add up to an accounting, from which we derived that even small sins will add up until they deserve one big punishment. So if we have that pasuk that teaches us that small sins are accounted for, then why do we need this pasuk of kol se'on? This pasuk that we learned that this se'on is like a small se'ah. Se'ah is a big measure. Se'on is a small measure, and even a small sin will get ra'ash, will get stamped out with fierceness, will get a small punishment. So lamali, why do I need both of them if they're both addressing small sins? And the answer is lech midah, by the measure, even by a small measure. In other words, from the first one, we know that small sins will add up to a big punishment, but not always. Sometimes a small sin will get a small punishment, but it will be accounted for in one way or another. And now if we have this pasuk of se'on that teaches us small measure is a punishment for a small sin, why do I need the pasuk from Yeshaya, other pasuk from Yeshaya that says besa se'ah, that talking about a large measure? If a small sin is punished, then certainly a large sin is punished. So this pasuk was about a full se'ah. Will get punished. So what do we need that? Lichat Rav Chinena bar Papa, damar Rav Chinena bar Papa, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu nifra min ha'uma ad she'at shilucha, shenemar besase'a beshalecha. Oh, so this will actually apply on a national level, this pasuk. And that's what Rav Chinena bar Papa. We're going to see a couple of interpretations of applications of this statement of Rav Chinena. So remember it. That Kadosh Baruch Hu punishes a nation only when it's time for it to be banished. In other words, on a national level, you can't give a small punishment on a national level. It's all or nothing. For an individual person, can get a cold, he can get stub his toe, and get a small punishment. But a nation adds up until they deserve full punishment, and they're banished and they're destroyed totally. So that's why this pasuk is talking about a full measure. Now we ask about this. Is that true, that on a national level there's just one punishment at the end and they're finished? Ini v'hamar Rava shelosha kosot hamorat Misraim lama achat sheshatat b'imei Moshe v'achat sheshatat b'imei Paro necho v'achat shetida lishtot im chavroteha. After all, Rava said regarding the three cups said regarding Egypt. This is talking about the dream of Sarham Mashkim. This says the word kos three times in his dream. So why mention it three times? Now, so the cup here is related to a cup of cursing, which is mentioned elsewhere. So these three cups are three curses, three punishments that will come upon Egypt. When? One time in the time of Moshe, during Yetziat Mitzrayim, all of the makot that they got. And the second one in the time of Paro Necho, during the first Bet HaMikdash, a different Paro, and he was conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel. And another one that's going to happen in the future. Suggestion, this may refer to the 6-Day War. In the future, Egypt, they come and they try to attack, and they were attacked and they were conquered. So here you have three times that a nation was in fact punished on a national level. So we see that this is a challenge to what Rav Chinena said, because he said that once a nation gets enough sin, then they are punished all at once and they are eradicated from the world, and not small punishments from time to time. And here you see that they received three different times punishment, were not eradicated from the world, but were, survived to get punished again at a different time. So how can this is a contradiction? And maybe you'll say, no, that even though they're all in the land, the geography of Egypt, they are different dynasties. They are different kingdoms. So maybe you'll say the ancient pharaohs of the time of Egypt, Ramses, they are gone, and Paro Necho in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, that's 1,000 years later, is a different government, different peoples, and the one in the future, if it's a 6-day war, is also a different people, ethnically and by their government, and so the previous one was totally destroyed, and this is a new one. So maybe you'll say that, and therefore that then supports Rav Chinana's claim, right? Because each of those dynasties or that entire people is destroyed, and this is a totally new people, which historically actually makes a lot of sense. However, we cannot say this because B'Hatanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda Minyamin Ged HaMitzri Haya Li Chaver Mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva. Amar Minyamin Ged HaMitzri Ani Mitzri Rishon V'Nasati Mitzrit Rishona Asi Libni Mitzrit Sheniya Kedei Sheyehe Ben Beni Mutar Lavo Bakahal. Rabbi Yehuda said, I had a friend in the class that was a student of Rabbi Akiva. This friend, his name was Minyamin. Minyamin is an alternate pronunciation of Binyamin. Bet and Mem are both bilabials and often interchanged in pronunciation. So he was a convert from the Egyptians. And the halacha is that an Egyptian convert cannot marry into the regular kahal of Jewish people until the 4th generation. They can only marry other converts. So Minyamin, the Ger Mitzri, says, I am a first generation convert, and I married another first generation convert, and then we will have a child, and that my son, we're going to marry off to a second generation convert, and then their children by that time will be third generation, meaning a great grandchild of an Egyptian, and so that's already 4 generations, and then his grandchild will be permitted to marry. And so what do you see here? That even during the time of Rabbi Akiva, which is way later than Paro Necho, already still the biblical prohibition of don't marry an Egyptian was still in effect, meaning that they understood that the Egypt that the Torah was talking about is the same Egypt that was still around. If it was a completely new peoples, then the Torah prohibition would not apply to them. The fact that it does means that we see this as a continuous civilization. And therefore, this is in fact, a challenge to Rav Chinena. And in fact, we see that here on a national level, they receive a punishment, but they're not totally wiped out. So rather, we're going to have to reapply. Ela itmar hachi itmar. Amar Rav Chinena bar papa en hakadosh baruch hu nifra min hamelech ad she'ad shilucho shene'emar b'sa'asa'ah b'shalachati ribena. Rather, Rav Chinena, if he said this, he was not talking about an entire nation, but rather about a king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not punish a king for sinful behavior until it's time for his banishment. In other words, a king that does 1 bad thing, 2 bad things, is not going to get a small punishment for each. Rather, they're going to fill up until he's ready to go completely. In a way, it's a favor to dole out small punishments, because then you can get rid of that punishment and then go on and have more longevity. Whereas if you save up the sins until it's full, then the person gets fired, or gets in the case of being a king, gets killed, gets banished, and is no longer there. This explains a lot for theodicy. How come there's evil kings that are around for a long time, and why aren't they punished? And the answer is so that their sinfulness can be filled up, so that they will be destroyed. And so that's what it's talking about. The full se'ah applies not to entire nation, but rather to a king. Now we have a third application of Rav Chinena's statement. And this one is going to apply to Bnei Israel. Pasuk in Micha says in Peshat, I am Hashem, I do not change. Right? And you, the sons of Yaakov, are not consumed. In other words, I'm with you. I will never change. I will always keep you safe. However, the Midrash is reading Shaniti, not as change, but rather as repeat. Ani Hashem lo shaniti, lo hiketi le'oma v'shaniti la. I, Hashem, I don't have to repeat myself. when I punish someone. All right, there's no nation in the world that I had to punish twice. In other words, Hashem aims once, shoots to kill, right? And if Hashem is going to punish a nation, there's not going to be any future for them. That's true in general for other nations. However, "V'atem b'nei Yaakov lo chilitem, haynu dichtiv chisai achale bam, chisai kalin v'hen enan kalin." But you, the children of Yaakov, you are not consumed, and this is connected to the pasuk in Ha'azinu. That's Hashem says, "My arrows I used up on them," right? My arrows are all used up, but Bnei Israel are not destroyed. And that's because even when Hashem is angry at Bnei Israel and sends a punishment, He always leaves She'erit Israel, a remnant that can go on. Hashem will not wipe out Bnei Israel completely, even though, of course, He has the power. And with other nations, once their sin is full, they're destroyed. But for Bnei Israel, even though they endure many calamities, but they are not ultimately destroyed. Amar Rav Hamnuna, En HaKadosh Baruch Hu nifra min hadam ad shetemale se'ato shene'emar b'melot sifko yesed lo. Rav Hamnuna applies this idea does apply this idea on a personal level, that Hashem does not punish a person until his se'ah, his measure of punishment of sin is full, and then gives it all at once. Darash Rav Chinena bar Papa, Mai dichtiv, Ranenu sadikim badunai, Lai sharim nava tehila, Al tikri nava tehila, Ela nave tehila. Ze Moshe v'David shelo shartu sonehem b'ma'asehem. Rav Chinena gives a midrashic interpretation of this pasuk that says, rejoice, tzadikim in Hashem, and those who are upright or that follow a straight path, for them it is good for them to praise Hashem. Hashem likes their praise, right? It's proper for them to praise. But we say, since at this time of the Talmud there were no nikudot, they had an oral tradition of how to read a pasuk, so they knew how to read the pasuk. But since there's no nikudot, you can also repunctuate it and derive another layer of meaning. So don't read nava, but rather naveh. Naveh means a house of praise, a mishkan or a Beit HaMikdash, tehillah. So this refers to Moshe and David, who built something in a place in praise of for praise of Hashem. Moshe built the Mishkan, and David built the walls of the city of Jerusalem. He conquered Jerusalem, established it. He didn't yet build the Beit HaMikdash, but he set the foundations so that it could be built in the generation after him. And in both of these cases, the enemies were not able to benefit from their achievements. So that's what it means, naveh tehillah, that the house was of praise and was not taken over by the enemies, even though the enemies came and eventually destroyed Yerushalayim, but they did not take those precious items. As we see, David ichtiv tavu ba'aris she'areha. David, he built a citadel in the city. He built fortifications of Jerusalem, but those gates went down into the ground, as it says in Echa, meaning that they're down there, and the gates and the enemies did not take them and benefit from them. Moshe damar mor mishelimne mikdash rishon nignaz ohel moed kerashav kerasav ubricha b'amudav ve'adanav. Hecha amar Rav Chisda amar avimi tachat mechilot shel hechal. And regarding the Mishkan that Moshe built, we have a tradition that once the first Beit HaMikdash was built, what happened to Ohel Moed? Now they had a bigger building, so what did they need the tent for? So the tradition says that the tent, the boards, the clasps, the bars, the pillars, sockets, all the parts of the Ohel Moed were sequestered, right? They were hidden away. And where were they hidden away? In the tunnels under the Hechal, right? There's a whole tunnel system under Har HaBayit. With all kinds of secret tunnels, and somewhere down there are holy vessels and the Ohel Moed, and who knows what other fun items might be down there. There are a lot of kotel tunnels now that are being dug further and further, right? Every day there's new findings there. It's a little dangerous to dig immediately under the Temple Mount, because you can't just open it up and dig down there, but maybe one day we'll be able to find what's underneath. Okay, Tano Rabbanan, Sotah natnu eneha b'mi she'eno ra'ui la, ma shebiksha lo nitan la, ma shebiyada nitaluhu mimenna. Now back to Sotah, that's where we got onto this whole midah keneged midah theme. The Sotah put her eyes upon someone who is not fitting to her. In other words, she set her gaze to sin with some other man that she's not married to, and what she tried to get will not be given to her, even if she, well, so let's assume that she was guilty and she did sin with him one time, but the point is that it was illicit, and she will not be able to marry her adulterer. That's a halacha, that if a woman is suspected of committing adultery with a certain person, then even if she gets divorced from her husband, the rabbis do not allow her to marry that man that she committed adultery with. So not only will she lose out on being with that man, but also even what she had in her hands, meaning her husband, her legal husband, will be taken from her because she will be forced to divorce him without a ketubah, if there's, for example, a witness that, as we saw before, that saw her guilt. Okay, so not only if you try to take what's not yours, not only do you not get it, but you also lose what you already have. And this is a general rule. Anyone who sets his eyes, tries to take something that's not his, what he's trying to get illegally, he will not get, and furthermore, what he already has, he will lose. וכן מסינו בנחש הקדמוני, שנתן עיניו במה שאינו ראוי לו, מה שביקש לא נתנו לו, מה שבידו נטלוהו ממנו. And this we see this lesson from the Nachash back in Gan Eden, that he set his eyes upon something that was not permitted to him. This is based on a midrash that says that the snake wanted to marry Chava. And so not only did he not get to marry Chava, but he's also punished and cursed that there's going to be eternal hatred between women and the snake, right? As that's part of the curse of the Nachash. Eva Ashit. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, אני אמרתי יהיה מלך על כל בהמה וחיה, ועכשיו ארור הוא מכל הבהמה מכל חיית השדה. Hashem says, I was going to make the Nachash the king over all the animals, domesticated and undomesticated, right? It was supposed to be able to walk upright and knew how to talk and was smart and wisdom and would be able to be the leader of all the animal kingdom. And now, because it tried to rise above even that station and take a human that was above his ability, and was not allowed to him, therefore now becomes cursed, the most cursed, the lowliest of all of the animals in the field. He was supposed to be able to walk upright, and now he's going to have to slither on his belly. He was supposed to eat what humans eat, because he was upright, he couldn't go and reach fruit. And now he's going to have to eat dust. הוא עמד להרוג את האדם ועשה את חווה, ועכשיו אבה אשית בינך ובין האישה, בין זרעך ובין זרעה. He said, the snake said, I'm going to kill Adam and marry Chava, and now there's going to be eternal enmity between between the snake and woman, between their children after them. וכן מסינו בקין וקורח ובלעם ודואג ואחיתופל וגחזי ואבשלום ואדוניהו ועוזיהו והמן, שנתנו עיניהם במה שאינו ראו להם, מה שביקשו לא ניתן להם, ומה שבידם נטלוהו מהם. And we find the same thing regarding all of these biblical characters. This is a common theme throughout the Tanakh. Cain wanted to take what was not his. He wanted to take Hevel's role over. Hevel was a shepherd, and Cain was a farmer. Cain says, I want to even take your pasture land. I want to be in charge of all the industries. And so he was jealous to try to kill Hevel, based on somewhat of a midrashic reading of this, and because he did that, not only does he not get Hevel's land, but Cain himself is going to be a wanderer having no land. Korach wanted to be the leader. He wanted to be Kohen Gadol and the leader, political leader of Israel, and because he tried to take more than he was deserving, then he got nothing and was destroyed and killed. Bil'am, he tried to curse Bnei Israel. Not only did he not curse them, but he even blessed them. Doeg ha'adomi, he was against David and told Shaul all about David. And he killed the Nov Ira Kohanim. So he was trying to gain power. Not only did he not gain power, but his end, according to the Midrash, is that he died young and lost his share in Olam Haba. Some of these characters, it's clear from the Peshat of Tanakh that they fit into this model. Some of them is based on Midrashic readings. Doeg has a lot about him said in Midrash, that he was a Talmid Chacham, and then he forgot his learning, and his students were upset at him, and they killed him, and he lost Olam Haba too. So Doeg, in various ways, did things he wasn't supposed to, and got what he deserved. Achitophel, who was the advisor of David, but then went against David, and his advice was not heeded, and he went and he committed suicide. Gehazi was the servant of Elisha, and when Naaman sent a gift and Elisha rejected it, Gehazi tried to take this gift of robes for himself. So he was taking something that was not his, and he was punished by getting leprosy. Avshalom and Adoniyahu both rebelled and tried to become king after David, and both of them failed and were killed in their rebellions. Uziyahu was a king, and he wanted to be a Kohen also, and he went into the Bet HaMikdash and was doing ketoret that was not allowed. It was not his place, right? He had a high place, and he tried to take a different position that did not belong to him. And he also got Sadat. Haman, he wanted to be in power and kill the Jews, and instead he lost his power, and the Jews gained power instead, and he was killed. So each of these people, they set their eyes on something that was not fitting to them, that was not permitted to them, and not only did they not achieve what they wanted, but even what they had already was taken from them. So this is an important lesson, that be happy with what you have, and if you try to get more than is coming to you, then you will even lose that which you have. And so now back to Sotah, the Baraita mentioned that because she transgressed with her thigh and then with her stomach, so that's the order in which she's punished, thigh and then stomach. מנהנה מילה, אילמה משום דכתיב בתת אדוני את ירכך נופלת ואת בטנך סבה, והכתיב וסבתה בטנה ונפלה ירכה. We have a contradiction between the order of these items in the pasuk. In fact, there's 3 pasukim that have different orders. We see at first the Kohen will will say this shivu'ah, and says, listen, this is what's going to happen. So here we have yarech first, and then beten, thigh, and then belly. But in the very next pasuk, continuing that, it says beten and here beten first, and then yarech. That's a kind of little chiasm within this shevu'ah. And then, not only that, but after, that's in the language of the Kohen says, but then when it actually describes what happens when she drinks, it says beten first and then yarech second. So that's what we're asking about, these pesukim. Which one is it? Amar Abaye ki layet techila yarech v'hadar beten layet. Umaya ki badke ki orhayhu badke beten beresha v'hadar yarech. So when the Kohen is pronouncing the curse, so he mentions first the thigh and then the stomach, because that's the order of the sin. So that's midah keneged midah. However, when the water goes down, the water follows its normal track, down through the body, and it goes to the stomach first, and then reaches the thigh. So that explains that contradiction. Hold on, but we have a question, because back in the curse, within the curse itself, it says the other way around, beten first and then yarech second. So hu demoda la kohen de beten b'resha v'adar yarech shelo lo silaz al mayim hamarim. Oh, that's because the Kohen wants the woman and everyone to know that, listen, even though I'm mentioning one first because that's the way she sinned, you should know that if she's guilty and the water actually does its job, then you're going to see beten first and then yarech, so that people don't say, oh, see, the bitter waters didn't work. He said it's going to to happen in this order, and in fact it happened in the other order. So therefore, the Kohen says it's going to happen in this order, even though midah keneged midah is the other order. All right, now next Mishnah is going to continue on this theme of midah keneged midah. Shimshon halach achad einav lefichach nikeru pelishtim et einav shneimar vayochazuhu pelishtim vaynakeru et einav. Shimshon, he went after his eyes, and he went and married a Pilishti, which is not a great thing to do. And because he went after his eyes, so his eyes were plucked out by the Pilishtim. Midah keneged midah. Avshalom nitka'a b'sa'aro lefichach techila nitla b'sa'aro ולפי שבעל 10 פלגשי אביו לפיכך ניתנו לבו 10 לונביות שנאמר ויעשו בו 10 אנשים נושאי כלי יואב. Avshalom was very proud of his hair. He was so beautiful, and that's how, he became very popular because of that. And midah keneged midah, he was hung by his hair. Right? He was riding on a horse, and the hair caught in a branch, and he was hung. Also, because he came upon the 10 concubines of his father, and that was part of his rebellion to do that. That was a sign of taking my father's place by doing that as a king. Therefore, he got 10 spears thrust into him as he was hanging there, right? These 10 young people went and they speared him. As it says, right, the 10 people that were the bearers, the weapons bearers of Yoab, went and they surrounded him. Ulfisha ganav shelosha גנבות לב אביו ולב ביתין ולב ישראל שנאמר ויגנב אבשלום את לב אנשי ישראל לפיכך נתקעו בו 3 שבטים שנאמר ויקח 3 שבטים בכפו ויתקעם בלב אבשלום. And because Avshalom stole three times, not literal stealing, but rather stealing people's minds, hearts and minds, that of his father, and that of Betin, and that of Israel. As it says, Avshalom stole the hearts of Bnei Israel. He got them to be on his side and to join in with his rebellion. And therefore, he got 3 shevatim. Is a play on words. The word shevet can mean both groups of people, and so it's those 3 groups that he tricked. But also, shevet can mean a spear. And in fact, Yoav speared him with 3 spears, as it says, Yoav took 3 spears and put it into Avshalom's heart. And so that was actually before the 10 men that bore his armor went and also speared him. Okay, so each of these punishments was a midah keneged midah for something he did. But don't think everything's bad. Midah keneged midah also works in the positive way. Miriam המתינה למשה שעה אחת שלמה ותתעשו אחותו מרחוק. לפיכך נתעכבו לישראל 7 ימים שנאמר והעם לא נסע עד האסף מרים. Miriam waited for Moshe for 1 hour. Not literally an hour, it means for a short time. A certain time, a period, while he was baby Moshe on the Nile, and she was looking out for him nearby to check to make sure everything would be good with him. She stood far off, and therefore, when she was stricken with sarat, actually, ironically, for saying something negative about Moshe. But even so, when she was put into quarantine for 7 days, the nation waited for her until she got better and joined the people again. So because she waited for Moshe, for his well-being, so the nation waited for her when she needed it. יוסף זכה לקבור את אביו ואין באחיו גדול ממנו שנאמר ויעל יוסף לקבור את אביו ויעלו עמו גם רכב גם פרשים מי לנו גדול מיוסף שלא נתעסק בו אלא משה. Yosef merited to bury his father. Right, when Yaakov died in Egypt, Joseph went and buried him in Israel, and there is no one greater than Yosef among his brothers, right? So this is midah keneged midah, and how do you see that? Because it says Yosef went and he buried his father, so that's how we know that Yosef was the main person that was the leader in taking his father for a proper burial in Me'arat HaMachpelah. And it says everybody else went with him, right? In other words, Yosef is the leader and everybody else follows along. And who is greater than Yosef, and how do you see his greatness? That when it came time for Yosef to be brought for burial in Israel, Moshe himself is the one that dealt with Yosef's body and brought it, right? So that's a great honor to have Moshe himself. Moshe zacha be'asmot Yosef en bisel gadol mimenu gishenemar v'ikach Moshe et asmot Yosef imo. And Moshe, he merited to deal with and bury the bones of Yosef, and he achieved greatness in part because of that. As it says, Moshe took the bones of Yosef. That's where we see that he fulfilled that mitzvah. And Moshe, midah keneg midah, gets a reward that he who buried Moshe, none other than hamakom. It says vayikbod oto bagai. It just doesn't say who. There's a verb. It doesn't say who buried him. And so it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu buried him. Lo Moshe bilvad amru ela kol tzadikim shenemar v'halach lefanecha tzidkecha kebod Hashem ya'asfecha. And not only Moshe, but also all righteous people. The pasuk in Yeshaya says, your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of Hashem shall gather you in. Gather you in means in burial. Hashem himself will bury. So this is a beautiful midrash that builds one upon the other, right? Yosef is great. Yosef buried Yaakov, so he's great. Moshe buried Yosef, so he isn't great. Hashem buried Moshe. Look how great Moshe is. But that greatness, that's the highest level, in fact, is not only reserved for Moshe, but in fact is the level that any tzaddik can reach, who also will attain that same glory. So that's the power of midah kenegid midah, for good, right? It seems like, for bad you get equal justice. For midah, for good, it even increases. Tenura banan, Shimshon be'enav marash nemar vayomer Shimshon el aviv, ota kachli ki hi ashera be'ainai. Lefi nikeru pelishtim et einav, shenemar vayochazu pelishtim vaynakeru et einav. The Gemara now, quoting a Tosefta, is going to elaborate on what the Mishnah said. So Shimshon rebelled with his eyes, as it says. Shimshon told his father, I want this one, this woman, right, from this Pilishti, and because that's good in my eyes. So he followed just the outside looks, and he didn't marry someone with high quality person from his own nation. Therefore, his eyes were plucked out by Pilishtim themselves. Hold on, this is not right, because the pasuk also says that his father and mother didn't know that this was part of God's plan, that Shimshon should marry this Pilishti, so that eventually, as part of the plan, the Pilishtim will get punishment. And so, since this was part of God's plan, so this was not a negative thing that Shimshon did. And the answer is, Ki azal miya batar yashrute azal. Yeah, but nevertheless, Shimshon didn't know that either. And so when he did it, he was following his own yesed hara in doing this. And he was not acting l'shem shamayim. So it's true, even though God had a plan, but his intention was negative. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Techilat kilkulo be'azah lefi chalaka be'azah. His sin happened in Azah. That's where he found his Pilishti woman, and therefore he got his eyes plucked out also in Azah, the same place. Techilat kilkulo be'azah dichtiv v'yel Shimshon azata v'yel shemisha zona lefi chalaka be'azah dichtiv v'yoridu oto azata. He found this woman in Azah, and it also said that when he was captured, they took out his eyes and they brought him down to Azah and put him in prison there. Hold on, we have a problem. This woman from the Pilishti woman, he did not find her in Azah, but rather in Timnah. So you got the wrong place. And the answer is, the beginning of his sin happened in Azah. In Azah, actually, he found a zonah. And so that is worse. And so, since that's the worst item that he did, so we talk about Azah. Even though the Pilishti woman, actually, he found in Timnah, nevertheless, because the wrongdoing initially was in Azah, and therefore they joined together, and his punishment was in Azah. Okay, so then he fell in love with this woman called Delilah. Tanya Rabbi Omer. Ilmalelo nikra shema Delilah de'uyah heta shetikare Delilah. Dildela et kocho, dildela et libo, dildela et ma'asav. Rabbi says if her name was not called Delilah, it would have been fitting to call her Delilah. This makes reference to a lot of the names in Tanakh, even if they were given way before anything happened in their lives. Nevertheless, their names are symbolic of things that happened later on, and the Midrash likes to pick that up. So she's Delilah. Dal means to make weak, and she made him weak in his strength, in his heart, and in his deeds. Let's see each one. Dil delat kocho dichtib, vayasad kocho me'alav. She made him weak in his strength. Because, right, when she figured out his secret, that his strength is in his hair, she had them cut off, and then his strength left him. At first, she kept pressing and saying, what's the source of your strength? At first, he would say, oh, it's if you tie me with cords, then I'll lose my strength. If you tie me with new cords, I'll lose my strength. But each time, he was able to get out of it. And finally, he said everything that was in his heart, and he told her the secret was in his hair. And so, so that's there you see, she weakened his mind, such that his mind, such that he revealed to her the secrets. And this is after she cut off his hair, and he woke up in chains, and he thought, no problem, I'll break out of the chains. But he didn't know that Hashem left him, the strength that Hashem gave him left him, and so she weakened him in terms of God's presence as well, and so he couldn't act with his strength. And now that last time, Delilah realized that now he has revealed everything in his heart. How did she know that this time he was telling the truth, even though on the previous occasions he was lying? He said truth is recognizable. You can tell when someone's telling the truth and they fully reveal everything. Right, there's mannerisms, the way they say it, and right, it just you can tell. Abaye says a different answer, that she knew that he was Shimshon as a tzaddik, and he would not say God's name in vain. And therefore, when he said, I am a Nazir to God, he mentions God's name, he wouldn't say that if it weren't true. And so when it came to pass, she pressed him every day with words, saying, please tell me, right, your secret. What is the source of your strength? And so, so what does that mean? That she kept urging him. How did she get the truth out of him? What was that urging? That at the moment, right before the completion of Bi'ah, she slipped away and said, listen, hey, if you want to finish, then you're going to have to tell me your secret. So she was able to use his vulnerability. Now we're going back to the previous a couple of perakim back, to the promise to Shimshon's mother by the angel that comes and says, listen, your son's going to be great in Israel, so do not drink wine or beer or intoxicating thing, and don't eat anything tameh. Now, the word tameh can have multiple meanings. It can mean something that's ritually impure. It could also mean something non-kosher. And usually when it's talking about eating, it means like eating non-kosher meat. So, my kol tameh, vetu adashta devarim tameim kachla. So what does this mean? That anything unclean, they were eating unclean, right? Until now, this Shimshon's mother was eating non-kosher food. What does this term mean? No, it's not talking about non-kosher food, but rather things that a Nazir is not allowed to eat. It does seem that kol tameh is a kind of, instead of becoming tameh lamet, right, which Shimshon was not prohibited. because he was killing people all the time, so he didn't have a prohibition of becoming tameh lamet. So it seems that this tum'ah, at least the mother would not be able to eat something that was tameh, that a Nazir also wouldn't be able to eat, like grapes. Vayibaka Elohim et hamachtesh asher balechi. Now Shimshon went and he killed 1,000 Pilishtim with the jawbone of a donkey, which is a non-kosher animal. He called the place Lechi, which means jawbone, and then Shimshon was very thirsty. And so Hashem Vayibaka, he cleaved open a hollow in that place of Lechi. So what's the significance of this? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Deber Rabbi Ameh hu iva ledavar tameh. He wanted something unclean, meaning a tameh. They're talking about the Pilishti wife, who was prohibited to him, and therefore his life was almost gone and was dependent, hanging by a thread, and dependent on something unclean, this jawbone that he was able to use to kill these Pilishtim, and then to drink from the place called Lechi. ותחל רוח השם, אמר רבי חמא ברבי חנינא חלתה נבואתו של יעקב אבינו דכתיב והיא נחש דן נחש עלי דרך. Regarding Shimshon, it says the spirit of Hashem began to move him, that he decided he's going to be a leader in Israel. So, what do you mean by vatachel? In the sense of the nivu'ah began. Which nivu'ah? The one that Yaakov said to his son Dan, and Shimshon is from the tribe of Dan, and Yaakov said in the blessing that Dan will be a serpent on the way and killing all its enemies, and so too this will be fulfilled in Shimshon. Lefa'amo b'machane Dan, lamar bi Yitzchak deber bi Ameh, מלמד שהייתה שכינה מקשקשת לפניו כזוג כתיב הכה לפעמו במחנה דן וכתיב התם פעמון ורימון. So the spirit moved him, לפעמו, literally to move, but it's a curious word. So what does this mean? That the Shekhinah was jingling before him like a bell. And ringing, like, is calling upon him, like an alarm clock to go and act. And how do you know that pa'amor is in the sense of a bell? Because it says regarding the Kohen Gadol that he had on his clothing pa'amon, a bell, and a rimon. So this is the divine calling. Ben Sotah ben Eshtaol amar bi aseh. Sotah ve'Eshtaol shene harim gedolim hayu v'akaran Shimshon utchanan ze bazeh. So began to call him in a place between Sotah and Eshtaol. Well, what's significant about those place names? Sotah and Eshtaol, Rabbi Aseh explains, are two great mountains, and Shimshon uprooted the mountains and smashed them one against the other. That shows his great strength. In other Agadot, I was talking about the great knowledge and ability of certain sages. It says that they're able to uproot mountains and smash them against each other, meaning take two issues on halacha and compare them to each other and bring up questions and challenges, contradictions between them and solve them. And so that imagery comes from this imagery of physical strength, uprooting mountains and grinding them together. We'll continue with the Agadot about Shimshon on tomorrow's daf. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.